Hello, welcome to my channel, Edible Thoughts Makes. My name is Stephanie, and this channel is where I share with you my works in progress, finished projects, things I'm cooking up, books I'm reading, funny things my kids may say. My hope is that as you watch this episode and the previous episodes that you find some inspiration along the way. This is episode 125, and we are in the beginning of May year 2024. Spring has sprung here in Minnesota, where I am coming to you from. It is where I live with my husband and our 2 young children. Things are so green outside. It has been raining quite a bit, which is just absolutely lovely for all the plants. I feel like once they get that great drink of water, everything just turns green instantly overnight. It is so beautiful. So that also means the garden is going to need quite a bit of work in the next couple of weeks as we get our annuals planted and the vegetable garden going. We don't tend to plant things early and then transfer them outside. I just feel like the success rate isn't high enough to warrant the work ahead of time for us. I know for a lot of people they are very successful and it's great, but not my thing. So I feel like just planting right into the ground from seed from the beginning works fine for us, and the plants seem to know they have a shorter window here in Minnesota to grow, and so they seem to grow really fast. So I just don't worry about it. We do it like this every year and it works out just fine. So back up. The way I usually organize my videos here is we have a beginning intro welcome section. I usually talk about the weather, some life updates, garden update, things like that. And then we go into a finished project section, works in progress, eats and reads, and food for thought. Food for thought can be anything that has been weighing on my mind, on my heart lately, something that I just want to share. Sometimes it's making related, a lot of times it's just general life related, which for me, a lot of times ends up being a little bit of making related, because making for me is 24/7. It is just part of my life. I come from a very creative family and married into a creative family. Making is just part of our everyday life. In my videos, I include closed captioning, so you can click on that CC button. I do include notes to things that I talk about here. They are in the description box below the video. Sometimes you have to click show more or like an arrow, something like that. But there are links provided down there to makers, dyers, shops, websites, things like that. I do use Ravelry for my project pages, and those are marked in a separate section, and then you can click on there to get more notes should you need them. I do try my best to explain my process and my thought process and the physical actual making process of my projects here on YouTube. I feel like it makes for another way of sharing information, and hopefully it inspires you to try out the project or to also decide if that project is not a good choice for you. I feel like that is also very valuable in itself, so that you don't spend all that time and money into a project and then realize it is not your thing. So, okay, I mentioned that. What else? Speed. If I speak faster or slower than your preferences, YouTube also allows you to adjust the speed. You can just go faster, slower, whatever works for you. I also include timestamps for the different sections. So if you're watching the video in pieces, it can make it a little bit easier to find where you were. And also if you decide to skip around or there's only certain parts you're interested in, you can also just go to those timestamps. They are linked in the description box below this video. I think that is everything that I meant to mention. If not, oh well, we'll be okay. So like I mentioned, in the garden, things are greening up so nicely. Our daffodils are done, the hyacinths are done, and the few tulips we have are blooming. The ones that are closer to the road don't tend to be as demolished by the rabbits, and so they do get a chance to bloom. I'm talking like 4 blooms. But they're beautiful. They're like a pinky purple color. Our rhubarb is coming back very nicely. I think I might be able to harvest some the end of this week. I'm looking for at least 8 inches, and I should be able to make a rhubarb crumble or a rhubarb pie, so that'll be definitely something that we will look forward to. Hostas are coming up. The peonies are coming up really nicely. I've put in the supports, and so I don't always remember to do that early enough, and it can be a little tight trying to cram them in, but I did get them in early enough this time, so it was not tricky. I just have to go out there every few days to try to guide them back in so that they aren't going to be too floppy. Bee balm is coming up. Hydrangeas are coming back really nicely. Everything is waking up beautifully, and it is just so nice to see them again. It is like seeing old friends after hibernation, to say hello, welcome back, and I love seeing everything come back alive. So as far as projects go, I do have several knitting projects to share with you today, and I may do an outfit change halfway through because this sweater is getting kind of hot. It is cooler in the mornings. We've had like 40s at night. I don't think we're gonna hit freezing again. Cross your fingers. I hope I didn't just jinx it. During the day, it's like 60s, 70s, and so I feel like you can still get away with wearing a sweater, especially a lighter weight one, but usually by mid-afternoon, it's pretty warm. All right, the first finished project I'd like to share with you is the one that I am wearing. I knit this as part of the Lento Love Knit Along. It was hosted by Amy of La Bien-Aimée and Jana, who is the designer of this pattern, who is also, I believe, the co-founder of Lina Magazine. And this knit along went from, I think, early April through May 6th of 2024. And I finished it right when the knit along ended. But yes, I am very pleased with this. This is the first time I have tried this pattern. It is a top-down raglan construction, and it is designed to be at a loose gauge using US 10 or 6 millimeter needles with the ribbing on US 6 or 4 millimeter needles. There is a pretty wide size range. I don't have that number here on hand right now, but I will put it here on the screen so you can see the range in sizes. I knit the first size, which should have a finished circumference of 38.5 inches, but my gauge ended up being a little bit tighter. I could have either gone up to a US 10.5 or a US 11 for my main fabric. However, I liked the fabric I got, and so instead of 15 stitches for 4 inches, I was getting 16 stitches for 4 inches, which I knew ahead of time because holding a fingering weight yarn plus a mohair or other fuzzy yarn generally gives me 16 stitches on a US 10. And so my finished circumference ended up being closer to 36 inches, which was still great because that gave me 4 inches of positive ease in the bust area, but still 1 inch of positive ease around my hips. And the recommendation for the pattern is 5 inches of positive ease, so I'm still pretty close. The pattern does recommend using a fingering weight yarn plus a lace weight yarn, and I had this special yarn that I was showing you last week that I have had for a few years. This is dyed by Shoba of Serendipitous Wool. I'm going to hold the remaining yarn I have here on the screen. It is a beautiful pinky red coral with speckles of green and purple. Hopefully it's in focus and showing up here. And here is the yarn label. It is 100% non-superwash Highland wool. And I had 212 yards to, not 212 yards, 212 grams to start. And I ended up using 170 grams. Did I say grams? 212 grams. Yeah, I had 212 grams to start, and I ended up using 170 grams. So I do have some remaining. And then I had purchased this mohair from Pearl Soho during like a spring cleaning sale. I can't remember if it was because there was extra of it or what, but I don't think this color is discontinued. They'll sometimes do spring cleaning sales where they'll have discontinued colors, but I believe this one's still on the website. So this one is Anjou Pear. It comes in 328 yards for 25 grams. And it is 60% superfine kid mohair, 40% silk. It has a beautiful halo to it. It is very close in color to matching the speckled peony of the fingering weight yarn that I have in terms of its vibrancy and that underlying red. And I just felt like it was a beautiful combination. It is very fluffy yarn, and it's very, very warm. So of the mohair, I ended up using close to 60 grams. So I had purchased 3 25-gram hanks, and I do have some left over, and I think what I have remaining, I could make a hat and or maybe mittens out of it. So I'll just have to check yardage on some other projects and see how much I used on those to figure out what I can get out of my remaining yarn. So I again knit the size 1. I ended up with a little less positive ease than the pattern called for, but still within a range that I like. And it came out to be a beautiful drapey fabric. I did not alternate skeins in the hand-dyed yarn. A lot of times hand-dyed yarn recommends you alternate skeins, which means you break it up where every other row, round, or every 2, or however way you want to do it, ends up being the other hank of yarn. That way you mix it up a little bit. Because it's hand dyed, there will be areas that often have a little bit of pooling, either in the color or the speckling, depending on how it's knit up and the gauge that you're knitting at. I decided not to do it. 1, because I felt like the mohair would give it a little bit of a washed effect to kind of muddle, or maybe not muddle is the right word, but just make it a little softer. I did notice some areas where it was a little bit different. So I'm gonna stand up to give you a look. So this front section is a little bit darker in speckling. And then there's this lighter band that has less saturation in the dye. It's a little more noticeable, I think, in the back area. And there's just a little bit of this section that's lighter. However, it isn't super noticeable. Plus, I went in and duplicate stitched some areas in this darker section just to break it up a little bit, and I feel like it did the job. So it's fine for me. Now, as far as modifications go, the neckline I did not do a provisional cast on as recommended. I just did an old Norwegian cast on, which is very stretchy, and I knit folding the band together to the cast on edge. And this I did use the recommended needles of US 6, which is a 4mm, and I think in the future I might go up to US 7 or US 8 just to have it not as close of a crew neck. I feel like it's generally okay, and maybe in the winter and the fall I won't mind it, but right now it's just a little warm. And so with the mohair so close to my neck, I can feel it tickling a little bit. It is not prickly, but because it's warmer, I feel like, well, I don't know, maybe in the winter and fall I won't mind it so much, so it's fine. And I did lengthen the sleeves quite a bit. In the pattern, it is a 3/4 length sleeve, and I clearly have very full length sleeves on here. I knit probably like 4 or 5 inches past the recommendation. Plus, I did a different rate of decreases. Again, because my gauge was a little tighter, I did not want very fitted arms. And so though I picked up for the same amount of stitches as called for in the pattern for size 1, I didn't do the same decrease rate. I did a more gradual decrease rate, and then at one point I just ended up knitting even, so no decreases. I think that might have been by the elbow, and then I didn't decrease to the full amount either in the pattern. I think mine have 4 less stitches or something like that. And then for the cuffs, I believe I used the US 6 for the ribbing there. Yes, I did use the US 6 in the ribbing here, but for the body ribbing, I did a US 8 because I just didn't want it to cinch in too much, and I was a little concerned that because I was already only going to have 1 inch of positive ease at the hips, I definitely didn't want it coming in more. That being said, I also lengthened the body, so if it was hitting at my natural waist, it wouldn't have been an issue, but because I lengthened the body by several inches, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't going to be tight. I will stand up here one more time so you can see here. I also did a slight high-low hem. I'm not sure if it'll show up here, maybe on the side. And it added about almost 2 inches to the back length. So with the beginning around in the center, basically I could just go like to one side, do German short rows, come back, knit the same number of stitches around to the other side, and then come back, and then I think I would knit then again to maybe 6 inches or 6 stitches before that double stitch, and then turn and come back and do the same on the other side, and then keep going until I was closer to the middle, and then I knit around all the way around to resolve all those double stitches before starting my hem. I think there are lots of tutorials out there that'll talk about how to add short rows to your garment. And so, of course, that was definitely not a tutorial, but just a quick little summary of how I did mine. I didn't mention the pants that I'm wearing these with. These are the Tyler trousers by Jeanette Celeste, and I sewed these up a couple of years ago. I'm not sure I'm gonna be able to. Actually, let me see if I stand back here maybe. So these pants I sewed out of a linen cotton fabric. There are these deep pockets in the front, and I've sewn a few pairs of these pants, and I think the other pockets I made smaller, but these are one of the patterns that are more, I think they're considered zero waist or low waist because the pockets are actually cut out from the middle of the pants fabric. These are very wide-legged. If I stand up here, and they have an elastic waist, and it tells you how to adjust for your fit. So there isn't a ton of sewing on these pants, and they're really comfortable and fun to wear, and I feel like they go really well with my sweaters. I can also decide if I want to tuck in the front, and because there's less fabric in the front since I did a high-low hem versus, doing it longer all the way around, I feel like when I tuck in the front, there's not a ton of fabric gathering on the side, which sometimes can happen if I'm knitting a much longer sweater that's like 14 inches from the underarm. Then the front sometimes gets too bunchy for me to comfortably tuck without it looking like there's too much fabric there and I don't know what to do with it. So for me, the underarm to the bind off of the cuff, I knit 18 inches total. The underarm to the front hem is 12 inches. Underarm to the back hem is 13.5 or 14 inches. I can't remember exactly. And then my yoke depth, I did knit that slightly deeper because I was just, I don't know, I don't like the underarms really close to my armpit. I don't like how that feels. It feels really restricting. So I think I increased that a little bit too. So not including the neckband, I think it's like 9 inches. So including the neckband, it's closer to 10 inches, I believe. So I did knit that a little bit longer. So after I did all of my increases, I just knit a few extra rounds to make that a little bit deeper before separating the sleeves and the body stitches. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say about this. It is so nice. It is beautiful. I think I will wear it a lot in the fall and winter. Right now, in the early mornings, it's fine, but once the sun comes out, whew, it's getting a little warm. So I think with that, I'm going to change out of this into my next finished project, and then we'll go from there. Okay, I am back. And I am wearing a different finished project. This is the Queen's Cami by Tori Yu. And I will flash a picture of it here on the screen of Tori's version or sample, I guess, of the tank or cami. It has a couple of options and there are 9 sizes. This is meant to be worn with 2 to 4 inches of negative ease. Size 1 is a 28-inch finished bust circumference, and size 9 is a 60-inch finished bust circumference. Recommended yarn is to use something that has some plant fiber in it. The 2 bases that are used in Tori's samples have an alpaca silk cashmere, and the other one is a wool alpaca linen blend. It has the option of a high-low hem in the back. There's a folded stockinette hem on the bottom, and then the edges are all finished as you go. So there's no, I don't believe there's any picking up of stitches after the fact to finish any of the edgings. This is a fingering weight project, and the recommended needles are US 3, 3.25 millimeter, US 4, 3.5 millimeter, and a US 6, which is a 4 millimeter. So your gauge will vary throughout the project, and something that's really interesting about this is that instead of changing your stitch count from the cast on, you are changing your needle size to affect the gauge of the fabric. And that will shape the garment. It is knit bottom up, so if you are somebody that's just not sure about the length of the body that you want, maybe as you go, pull out another garment that might be similar that you would wear with negative ease and measure it against that to get a better idea of how long you might want your garment to be. Because the gauge of the fabric does change throughout, it ends up being an A-line. So for mine, I did use one of the yarns that's recommended in the sample, and this is Linen Quill, and it is a base by Pearl Soho, and the colorway I used is Lychee Pink. It is a beautiful heathered yarn that's a reddish pink, a little more earthy. It comes in 439 yards for 100 grams. And I did not bring the rest of the yarn that I had started with for it, but I had just a little bit left. I wasn't entirely sure if I would be playing Yarn Chicken because I was pretty close to the amount that was recommended in the yardage, and I cannot remember what percentage of buffer Tori puts into her patterns. And then because I was looking at the schematic that was provided for the finished measurements, I knew that I wanted to lengthen the body from like a high hip crop to a little longer. And then because of that, if I looked at the finished hemline circumference, it was going to have 2 inches of negative ease on my hips, which I didn't want. And so I was going to cast on the size 2, which would give me closer to 3 inches of positive ease around my hips. But then I would end up with 0 ease at my finished bust circumference, which actually would be fine, but the pattern recommends 2 to 4 inches of negative ease. And I feel like with negative ease patterns, it's always a little bit trickier and a little less forgiving than patterns that have positive ease, because the fabric is designed, or the pattern is designed for the fabric to stretch in certain places for the fit. And I didn't want any like gaping in the underarm section. And so I figured, okay, how am I gonna make this work for me? And something that I do like about this pattern is that the straps are wider. And so it is pretty easy to wear without bra straps showing, if that is something that you look for. And I really liked the gentle V-neck shaping. It's in the front and the back, with the back slightly higher. And yeah, so let me tell you what I did. I ended up casting on for the second size to get the hip circumference that I wanted. And then I decreased as I went to get to the size 1 by the time I got to changing the needle size for changing the fabric density. And so then I finished the top, I guess you could say bodice section, as a size 1. Now I will say, doing those decreases, the decreases themselves weren't tricky, because on each round I would just decrease 2 on each side with like a center stitch on each side. And I did it, I think, by the inch as I went up. And the tricky part though was getting down to the right size for the size 1, because I can't remember if 1 was an odd number, 1 was an even number or something, but I just had to fudge a little 1 stitch when I was doing the bind offs for the underarms, and it's fine. At this fine of a gauge, 1 stitch is like a millimeter or something, maybe a couple millimeters, but it didn't make that big of a difference. So I ended up with more of an A-line shaping than even the pattern calls for, because I started with a size 2 and decreased up to a size 1, or down to a size 1. I said up because we're knitting bottom up. So as I was going up, I went down to a size 1. Let me stand up to give you a better view of it. And then I also wanted to note that because I was worried I would run out of yarn, I did do the bottom hem on the inside a different color, like some yarn remaining from a different project. And so that way it saved me a little bit. Like I was worried about like 5 grams maybe, and it ended up working out fine. I ended up using 113 grams total, and that's with lengthening the body. That was my main change, and of course the size thing. So I'm gonna stand up here. I'm gonna show you the inner hem. So I have a light pink in there, peony pink. I used about 4 grams of that. And I believe my hem in total used 15 grams, if that kind of helps you out. Maybe you wanna do like a contrasting band. So that's something that I did do, and that was again for the size 2. And I actually really like this fabric on a US 6, which is a 4mm. It's very nice and flowy and drapey. And then on the sides, I don't know if my decreases are very visible, but I ended up with decreasing on the sides, which led to some fun shaping, and it worked out really well for me. I'm going to take off my denim shirt here so you can maybe see the back a little bit better. Okay, so hopefully now you can get more of a full view. The back V area sits a little bit higher than the front V area. The body does skim over my hips. I don't have a ton of extra positive ease, but it's not tight there either, which is what I wanted. I did not want it tight at all. And then if we turn around to the front, the V is slightly lower, and I think I miscounted for my straps here. I could have done, I think, a few more rows in these front straps to drop this front V just even a tiny bit more, so that there would be even a bigger difference between the front and the back, but I can do that for next time. So I think even if I just did half an inch longer in my front ones, they would be fine. I feel like the side coverage here is really comfortable, and I can easily wear it as it is like this, or I could wear it with my denim shirt here. I have the sleeves cuffed, and I feel like it is really nice as an under layer, and then if it gets really hot, I can always take off this outer layer and still feel comfortable. And so my belly button is here, so it's definitely several inches past that. I did knit the body a couple of inches longer, and I really like this length. I think if I were to make another one, I could easily go shorter, and what I might do with my next one is cast on for the size 1 and then make it the same length that the body or the pattern has it. I might cast on for the size 1, do it the same length as what the pattern says, and then as long as it's above my hips, it should be fine. But I'm just not sure if I will wear it as much if it is that short. The finished body length for size 1 and for size 2 from the underarm bind off to the folded hem is 10 inches. So for me, 10 inches is like high hip. It would skim right above my hip bone. And I guess with high-waisted skirts or pants, that probably would work out okay. I might give it a try and see, because it will still be wearable. Or maybe I'll lengthen it by like 1 inch. But this length is really comfortable for me. I feel like I can wear it under a jean jacket as well, linen shirt, denim shirt, and it's super comfortable. And then I don't have anything in the underarms, so like my jean jacket is a little more fitted, then I don't have that uncomfortable bunchiness there. And I feel like, yeah, it's a really good spring staple piece. It's great with wide leg pants. I think I could wear it also over jeans if I wanted to. And yeah, so I think it's a good staple piece, and I would definitely make it again. So one tip I have for you is in the neckline and straps portion is just make sure you don't pull it too tight. If you pull it too tight, you will end up with puckering. And I was noticing that in the beginning, so I heavily blocked this part out to make sure there wasn't any puckering. But if you do pull that yarn around too tight on that I-cord, I think I don't know what it's called, I-cord as you go type of situation. I don't know. Just don't pull it too tight. If you pull it too tight, it will pucker. So just be careful of your tension there. And I will say the 2 different methods, depending on like which side of the garment you're working on, I don't really know how to explain it, but it's slightly different. And so my tension ended up slightly different on the 2 different methods of that finishing. I'm doing a really bad job of explaining that, but I don't know what the technique is called. And so I don't know what to say about that. Just watch your tensioning when you're getting around the edges, and just make sure that it's even and your stitches aren't puckering or too loose or whatever you call it. But I did really enjoy this project. I would definitely make it again. In fact, I have yarn set aside to make another one, and yeah, we'll see if I get to it. The queue line just ever grows. The next finished project I'd like to share with you is the Building Blocks Cardi. This is a pattern by Amy Scher, and it is one that I started, I believe, in January, and it is actually a pretty quick knit considering the gauge, but I got stuck at one point and then I put it away, and then I came back to it finally, and I'm so glad I did, because I have been really wanting to have this done. Now, if you see light bulb stitch markers on it, it's because the knitting part is done, but the rest of it is not, because I'm waiting on buttons from my husband so that I can finish this cardigan. If you've been around for a while, you will know that my husband made me some wooden buttons for my Highline Henley that is by Tori Yu. I tested it. think in the fall, last fall. And he made these beautiful wooden buttons for that Henley. And so I did at the time let him know that I will be knitting some cardigans in 2024 and I will need a bigger stash of buttons in a variety of different sizes. And then he lost the box or misplaced the box that he had some buttons in. And so he has to start over and make me some new buttons. Now, for these ones, I'm going to need, I think, 1 inch in diameter buttons. But yeah, so they're coming at some point, and yeah, we'll get them when we get them. This pattern, I knit the size A for a finished circumference of 39.25 inches, which gives me about 7 inches of positive ease. I did knit the body length, I think slightly shorter, maybe by 1 inch or 2. The needles called for are a US 8 or 5 millimeter needle for the main fabric and a US 6 or 4 millimeter needle for the ribbing. And I believe in Amy's sample she uses a woolen spun yarn, and I chose to use Pearl Soho's Hedgerow Base. And this is a non-superwash yarn. I actually don't know right now off the top of my head if it's woolen spun or worsted spun, but it feels woolen spun. It is 243 yards for 100 grams. The colorway I used is Fuchsia Rose. This yarn has beautiful rainbow tweed in it, and the tweed is embedded in the yarn. I think I talked about it last time that I'm really picky about my tweed. I don't like it to be pick-offable, so I want it to be really embedded in the yarn. I used a total of 316 grams, which is about 767 yards. There are different views in this pattern, like many of Amy's patterns, and I chose to do it without pockets and all in one color, and I just love it. This one is also knit bottom up, and my hip bone is here, so the hem starts at the hip bone. And I did mess up my buttonholes, but I fixed it. So in the steps, I don't remember exactly, but maybe there are 4 steps, and I did like steps 1 and 2 and then skipped 3 and 4. I don't really know what I was doing. But then I just resolved it on like the next round back or next row back. And so I think my buttonholes are slightly bigger than what it is meant to be in the pattern. And so my buttons will be slightly bigger to not pop out. They're just not as, I think, structured. I can't remember for this buttonhole if you're supposed to use a cable cast on maybe, but then when I went back around, I just wasn't thinking, and I think I did a backward loop cast on, which is not as structured. Anyway, whatever it is, I did fix it. It's fine, but I am going to need slightly bigger buttons to make it work. I ended up doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buttonholes, and I have the light bulb stitch markers on the other side marking where they line up. This is a lovely V-neck cardigan, and I explained last time that I really like a V-neck cardigan because I feel like it just sits much nicer on my body. I don't have it like flapping around like a crew neck might if I don't have it buttoned up all the way, and it's just much more comfortable, and I can wear like a collared shirt underneath and can still lay very nicely, and I couldn't wear a tank top, I can wear a t-shirt, I can wear whatever underneath and it'll still be really nice. A change that I made for the sleeves is I picked up for the 4th size just to make sure I had plenty of ease in the underarm for layering, and then my decreases, I think I did follow the decreases for the size D. I did knit my sleeves, I think, to the pattern specifications as far as length goes. Don't remember, sorry, but I just love how it turned out. I knit it to the length I wanted, and it's long enough that if I want to cuff the ends, I can. So if I had my watch on, then it wouldn't be covering it. I also just like it when I stick my arm out that it doesn't ride up. I really don't like it when my sleeves ride up when I don't want them to. And then also, you know, when you bend your elbow a lot, it eats fabric in your elbow. Well, it doesn't shorten on here, so I really like that as well. So they are a little bit longer, but just like I like them, and they're really comfortable. This yarn is very lightweight and very warm. I will say if you are more sensitive, it can feel more dry and maybe slightly scratchy. To me, it doesn't itch or scratch. It's also meant to be an outer layer, so I will always have something underneath, so I'm not concerned about that. Also, being a V-neck, I don't have to worry about it it being sensitive on the top portion of my neck area. And so I find this fabric really comfortable. I like it a lot. I find it really durable. I have made 2 building blocks in that line of patterns by Amy. It is the Building Blocks Drop. There you go, Building Blocks Drop. And I wear those all the time. It is a crew neck, and I made like a slipover version for that and slightly cropped. Those have worn so well. Not a single pill on it. They look brand new, and they just work really well. Fabric is nice and cohesive. I haven't had any snagging involved, even if it is knit at a larger gauge. I think it's 17 stitches, and I can't remember what it is for the Building Blocks Drop, but I feel like it's somewhere close to that too. And I've not had any issues with snagging or anything. This yarn is considered a DK weight, and there is no gaping in the fabric, and it just blocks out really smooth, really nice. Okay, I'm getting way too warm in this. I think we have one more finished project to share, and then I've got some works in progress, and I think what I'm going to do for those, just for sake of time, is not go through all the details on them, because I will go through all that once I finish them, but just kind of give you like a quick rundown of what's on my needles. So we will do that after this last finished project. The last finished project I'd like to share with you today are a pair of socks. This is part of my Operation Husband's Socks Drawer Year 2024. My goal is to knit him 12 pairs of socks this year, an average of 1 pair per month, and so far we are doing really well. And by we, I mean the socks are fitting him and I'm knitting the socks. So this is pair number 5. Let's see here. Here we are. I love how they turned out. So with this, I used a US 1.5, which is a 2.5 millimeter needle. And the yarns I used are considered heavier fingering weight. I would say close to light sport weight yarn, which is why I went up half a size in the needles that I was using. And the yarn I used, the main yarn, is Mud Punch. Chantel is a Canadian dyer. And this yarn colorway is called Tainted Glove, and it's an 80/20 superwash merino nylon, and it comes in 385 yards for 100 grams. And this is the yarn that I have remaining. I like to wind my yarn up into 2 separate cakes, and that is so that I can start them at the same time on their own needles. Actually showing it to you this way probably allows you to see the different colors a little bit better. This yarn, I believe, is a 6-color repeat. And the colorway of Knit Picks is Serpent Kettle Dye, and it comes in 357 yards for 100 grams. And it is 80/20 superwash fine Highland wool nylon blend. And I used 26 grams of the contrast color for the cuff, heels, and toes. And I used 65 grams of the self-striping yarn for the leg and the foot. I cast on 64 stitches, and I did a Knit 2 Purl 2 cuff for 20 rounds. I did the main color for the leg. I think it was like 63-ish rounds. I just went until I had 2 of these color repeats done. And then I did a shadow wrap short row heel in the contrast color, and then rejoined with the main color and did 2 repeats of the 6-color repeat sequence. And then I finished off in the contrast color for the toes. And I really love how they turned out. The leg is, I want to say, I think 10 inches from the cast on edge to the bottom of the heel. And I have enough yarn remaining to knit myself a pair of socks with this yarn, and I will use another Knit Picks Hawthorne kettle dye color for the contrast. So I just need to do a little math and figure out how long I plan to knit the legs of the socks, just to make sure I have plenty of yarn, but it is definitely doable. moving on to the works in progress. I have 4 here to share with you. I'm going to start with the ones that you've seen before already and just kind of skim through those real quick. So in this bag is the Ripple Camisole that I am knitting. It is by Jessie Made Designs. I was working on this last time as well. It is one that I just throw in my backpack, my purse, in the car, and I work on it whenever I can. It is a bottom-up construction, and it is just ribbing in a tube at this point, where you knit the body like that, and then there will be parts where you bind off to do the top section, and the back is pretty much straight. The front kind of has 2 triangles, and then you have these I-cord straps that then you attach to the back. And so I'm just working away at the body. I'm knitting mine much longer than the pattern calls for. I talked about the slight modifications I made in the previous episode, so if you're curious, go back to that episode. But this is just kind of round and round until I finish. I think I have, let's see, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 85-ish. I think I'm going to knit about 110 or 120 rounds before I get to the part where I knit that top section, but I will definitely weigh my yarn to see where I'm at before I get to that part. I am knitting it slightly different than the previous ones I've made. This is my 4th one, and so my yardage might be slightly different because I went down a needle size and up a pattern size to account for this finer yarn, but I think it'll be fine. We'll see. So the yarn I'm using is Farmer's Daughter Fiber Sock Squad for April, and this yarn is a 19.5 micron superwash merino nylon blend, and it comes in 463 yards for 100 grams, so it's a lighter fingering weight yarn. And this colorway is Out of the Mouths of Babes, and it's part of the monthly Sock Squad subscription. Oh, and this base is called the Bighorn Sock Base. It's super soft. I love this peachy color with the very delicate speckling. I think it's just absolutely beautiful, and it's going to be so nice as an underlayer that, again, I can put under these denim shirts, and in the cooler months, put it under a flannel shirt or under a sweatshirt or even under any other sweater. So hopefully this will be done by the time we talk next. I was hoping it would be done by the end of April, but as you can see, I got distracted with some other projects. And yeah, this will definitely be done by May, hopefully by the next time I see you here on this channel. The next project I have to share with you is part of Amy Scher's Knit Along that runs through the end of May. So I do plan on having this done by the end of May. Again, we'll see what happens. Here is a pin that was gifted to me by Amy and their team, and it celebrates the knit along that is going on. I'm hoping that it will focus here, and the pin features one of their patterns. I believe it's the Oolong Tank. And in here I have the coloring book tee that I am still working on. Details are on the previous episode, so I won't go into all of the details here again. And I am still working on this top yoke section. It is raglan, top-down construction, compound raglan, meaning the rate of increases is not the same throughout the entire thing, which means you get a better fit around your shoulders and less extra fabric. And I have on here beautiful stitch markers from Amy. This one is a teacup. Not sure if the glare will let anything show here or if you're just gonna see fuzz. Here's one, and then I have some on the other side helping me mark where I have the different compound raglan sections. So on this part I have these beautiful tea leaves, and these are all available in Amy's shop currently. I cannot promise if anything has been sold out or if it's still in stock, but you'll just have to take a look and see. The yarn I have here is beautiful. It is Wool Dreamers Sauna, and this colorway is Fratelli, which is like a chambray blue, heathered, 50-50 wool cotton, and I have not gotten to my contrast color yet, so you will see that when I get to that point. But yes, that is a quick, brief look at this project, and I will not be done when we talk next, unless it's a month from now. But I will have split for the sleeves at that point. I'm getting pretty close, so we'll see where we're at next time, but I'm really enjoying how this is knitting up. I think it is a beautiful fabric in a new to me yarn base, so I'm very curious to see how it will block out in a garment and how it will feel when I am wearing it. The next project I'd like to share with you is using the May Farmer's Daughter Fiber Sock Squad sock set. And this one is in a light fingering weight base, which comes in 3 colors. So there's 2 separate 50-gram hanks and then a 20-gram mini. So this one is named Love Letters to Finn Bell. It is a 75-25 superwash merino nylon blend. And it is the May Sock Squad sock set. Here is the yarn label. And I have cast on for a pair of DK Way socks. These are the High Desert socks by Lindsay Fowler. I believe I've made a dozen of these, not even exaggerating, maybe more than that. And here is my yarn. So there is one that's more of a gray, sagey green, and the other one is more of a beigey yellow with speckling of green and blue. And then the mini is like a caramely brown. And so I am using all 3 colors in this pattern, but I am changing up the pattern just slightly. I'm knitting them on US 3 or 3.25 millimeter needles. And I'm going to hold up what I've got so far. Here we are. They are knit cuff down. So I'm marling the 2 50-gram ones and then holding the mini double on itself for solid stripes. And I really like how they are turning out. I have Progress Keepers and Stitch Markers on here by Reshma of Hello Lavender and Yura of Knit Boop Studio. The translucent flowers are from Knit Boop Studio, and then the leaf and the yellow polymer clay ones are from Reshma of Hello Lavender. If I hold it too close, it doesn't seem to focus, but if I'm farther away, then it seems too small to see. So I don't know. So these are working up very nicely. Again, I like to knit my socks 2 at a time in tandem, so they have their own separate cakes of yarn, and then I just knit each section as I go. So I'll do one cuff and then the other cuff, one stripe section, the other stripe section, and then my tension is more even throughout, and then I finish with a pair of socks instead of feeling like I have to start all over again after I finish one sock. So I'll finish the legs on each of these, do the heels, and it is a slip stitch heel flap turn and gusset, and then do the feet and the toes. So these are DK weight socks, so they're knitting up fairly quickly in a nice dense fabric that I love for wearing in hiking boots. So I can definitely see myself wearing these with hiking boots this spring and summer. Last work in progress to share with you today is a new garment that I am excited to have for spring and summer. I suppose at this point it will be for summer. It is the Summer Saunter Tee by Samantha Guerin, and it is a V-neck with nice flowy sleeves, and I'm just so excited to give this one a try. I am using a new to me yarn. I am using a yarn that is 100% silk. It is Pearl Soho's Cattail Silk, and this colorway is Pale Wisteria. I have never used yarn that is 100% silk before. This one comes in 618 yards for 100 grams, so I feel like that's pretty lightweight. So I am holding it double to achieve a DK weight yarn or DK weight gauge. And I like how this fabric looks. It is not too holey where I feel like it will get snagged easily or I have to wear something underneath it. And I feel like it's still super drapey though, but just without a bunch of holes. So I have just cast on. I am using a US 6 or 4 millimeter needle as called for in the pattern. And this one is knit top down. You start in the back section. And so that's what I have here. So I guess it would be like this. This edge of cast on edge would be closer to the neck. And then once I am done knitting the back section, I will break the yarn and then knit the front section. And that's where we're at. So I would love to have this ready for the summer. It is a machine washable garment, which is great for sweat and sunscreen and all those things that come with summer. And there will be some positive ease to it. So I'm hoping for a nice drapey garment. Hopefully I will have shown a picture from Samantha's photos here on the screen so you can see what the finished project looks like. So we will see where I get with this, but I've definitely got my projects cut out for me. Okay, so I just went through all the books and stuff, and I don't think it recorded anything. And yeah, I think it was the entire Eats and Reads section that I was almost done with, and nothing recorded. So here we are again. Yeah. Eats and Reads. Okay, so recently I made a lemon meringue pie. I had made some ooey gooey oat bars by Smitten Kitchen, and I had made a really good bread pudding with some of my brother's leftover sourdough bread. Those were all delicious. Hopefully there will be pictures flashed on the screen here, and I can't remember if there was anything else that I made recently that seemed noteworthy to throw on here. I will say the weather has been turning so nice, like warmer lately, that we can comfortably sit outside and eat, and that has just been delightful. All right, on to the books. There will be pictures of the covers here on the screen. The covers of the books I've gotten recently have been beautiful, and also I just feel like it's a nice visual. Oftentimes I'll remember what the cover of a book looks like, but maybe none of the plot, and so here we go. We've gone to the library a ton recently, and a ton meaning multiple times a week. I encourage my kids to read a lot, but also if there's a book that just doesn't jive with them at the moment, it's totally okay to just return it. And that could be reading one chapter, it could be reading one page, it could be reading half the book. But if you don't like it, or you just don't want to read any more of it at the time, you know, there's no reason that you have to finish it. And that's just how I feel about it. And so we just go to the library a bunch of times. First book I want to share with you is Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. She's a new to me author, and this book was published in September 2021. It is a trilogy. All the books in the trilogy have been published. I think that's really important because sometimes you read new ones and then you're left hanging for like a year, and it can be kind of unsettling. So all 3 books in this trilogy are published. I am on the wait list for the second one, and hopefully I'll get it in the next couple of weeks. This is fantasy, romance, young adult fiction. A 17-year-old is our main character. She is desperate to stop a wedding and mend her broken heart. She ends up bargaining with an immortal, and things get a little dicey. I am engaged in the character development and in this world that is built. I want to learn more. I want to know what else is going to happen. I won't say it's like the best book I've ever read, but I am interested and I want to continue. So since this is a new to me author, oftentimes I will delve into other works by the same author at the same time just to see what else they have to offer. So I picked up another trilogy. This is called Caraval. I don't know if it's Caraval. I want to say Carnival, but there's no N. And so anyway, this is book 1 of the trilogy, published September 2016, young adult fantasy fiction, mystery, magic, romance, about 400 pages. I will say, there's like a sisterly bond going on here, and there's this interesting magical island where it's like immersive theater. I will say what's unsettling about it is it's so deceptive in figuring out what's real and what's not real that you're kind of sucked into playing this game as well. And I don't know, it just kind of made me feel like the creepy crawlies. I don't know. And there's a part in it, I will say look up trigger warnings. There is like a main part of this element plot thing that I have a hard time reading. And so I just, that part just didn't sit well with me. I didn't like it. I get why it's part of the story, but I just don't like that part. And so honestly, at this point, I'm not going to continue the series. I did find myself wanting to learn more, but only parts of it. And so, yeah. So I'm not going to continue the series. It's not that it's a bad read. There's just parts of it that I just can't handle right now. Or maybe ever. I don't know. But I did enjoy, I thought the magic was interesting, but it is a little on the dark side. And yeah, I'm not going to continue for now, but it's not that I don't recommend it. I just don't feel like reading it right now. Okay, speaking of requesting a ton of books from the library, my 5th grader had gone home with a ton of middle grade fantasy books. So many that she decided that she can't read them all. So she said, "Hey mom, can you read some of these for me and then tell me which ones I should read?" And so of course I can't read all of them, but one of the ones I read is The Pearl Hunter by Maya T. Beck, published February 2023. It's a debut novel for her, standalone as far as I know. Middle grade fantasy based on Japanese mythology, has adventure in it. It's based on pre-Shogun era in Japan, so we're talking like 1600s into mid 1800s. Of course, the book's not going through that whole period. It's just somewhere in there. What was a little interesting was that it didn't actually give any dates in the book either, so you couldn't quite place where it was. I kind of like to have an idea of what time frame I'm working with here, whether it's like future or past or present, but something, right? So somewhere in there. It's based on twins who are pearl divers, and it's a beautiful setting. I do feel like the characters could have had a little more development to them, and I really didn't like the ending. I felt like it was abrupt, it was vague. It kind of left you wondering if there was going to be another book, but maybe not. I don't know. I just didn't love how it ended. I did like the sisterly bond going on in the book, but I felt like it was a little heavier on one side than the other because you didn't really get the full story of the other one. I don't know. So I thought it was okay. I enjoyed the read, but it's not like a book I think I will read again. Yeah. So we returned it. I didn't recommend it to my daughter to read because I don't think she would like the ending. The last book that I want to talk about is also a trilogy, and this is also by a new to me author. It's the Gilded Wolves trilogy. This book was published in 2019. It is 388 pages. The author is American Filipino Indian, and this is a young adult fantasy historical fiction based in the late 1800s in Paris, France. I feel like there is a good diversity of characters. I do wish they were fleshed out a little more deeply, but since it's a trilogy, maybe you'll find out more on that in the next two books. Although I feel like in the first book, you should get a pretty rooted understanding of who the characters are, but then have like surprises later and have them grow. I don't know. I do get vibes from Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo and like the Ocean's 11 movie vibe. There's definitely heists involved, adventures, loyalty, betrayals, trust, that kind of situation going on. A little bit of like secret society type of stuff and high stakes and what's fair or not fair, revenge, that kind of stuff. And I am enjoying this read. And I do appreciate that the characters are diverse in a way where it's not like you have these main players and then all of your quote unquote diverse characters are like the minor players. So I like that they're all main players. I feel like that's really important and I really like that. And so yeah, I'm still reading book 1. I have brought home book 2 and 3 from the trilogy, so it is a completed trilogy, and we'll see where we go with that. Okay, my friends, we are on to food for thought. And I do have one little thing that I wanted to bring up, and it's kind of a fun one. I had gone between something that was like a little more serious and something that was a little more fun, but I think I want the little more fun right now. So I've been reading a lot of books that have a little crossover between like young adult fantasy and romance. I wouldn't say they go under the category of romantasy. I think that's what they call it, because it's definitely heavier on one versus the other. I think it's heavier on the fantasy element and less on the romance, but it's in there. And I was wondering if you would consider yourself a romantic and what that means. I had told a friend that I consider myself like a realistic romantic, and they were like, that's an oxymoron and doesn't make any sense. But I feel like it makes a little sense to me. Like, I don't mind being swept off my feet or like romantic gestures, but I don't like anything like, I don't want like all the attention from like everybody else, right? Like if it's just me and that other person, I like their attention, but I don't, you know, like when people propose in front of like a ball game, like I would be horrified. Like that would not be the type of attention that I want. But like if it was like a romantic stroll in the woods, like that I'm okay with. So what kind of romantic are you? Is there like a list of the types of romantics that are out there? I didn't Google search anything. I just had this idea as I was reading all these books that I figure there's probably some, you know how there's like tropes in books that are like running themes that are common in different books? And I was just thinking maybe there's like types of romantics out there too. I don't know. If you care to share, you're welcome to drop a comment in the comment section below. And if you don't want to, that's totally okay as well. If you would like to share a little bit about what you are working on or reading or what is exciting you this season, I would love to hear it. And I do encourage everybody to read through the comments below to continue the conversation. But if you don't feel like sharing anything, that's totally okay as well. I respect that you may or may not want to comment in like a public space. With that, I hope you are doing well. I hope you are taking good care of yourselves, your loved ones, and your neighbors. Cheers to being creative, and I will talk to you next time.